What if, after 50 years of saving, you realize you've been investing in all the wrong things? Not stocks, not real estate, not funds or portfolios, but time itself. What if every financial decision you made every late night, every sacrifice weekend, every moment you thought you were being responsible was actually stealing from something you couldn't buy back? I used to believe investing was about numbers, about knowing when to buy and when to sell. But the older I got, the quieter the truth became. Because the real market isn't the one on Wall Street. It's the one inside your life. Charlie Munger once said, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. And most people knew that and think he's talking about money. But I think he was talking about something far more important. Peace. See, compounding isn't just what your portfolio does when you leave it alone. It's what your mind does when you stop chasing. It's what your relationships do when you stop competing. It's what your soul does when you stop running after more. I didn't understand that when I was young. Back then, everything was a race, a salary race, a success race, even a retirement race. I thought the goal was to get there faster. But no one ever told me, you can reach your destination and still have nothing left to arrive with. And that's when it hit me. What if the reason so many people never find freedom is because they keep interrupting the one thing that could have built it for them: patience? Because every time we chase something new, we reset the clock. We sell too early. We quit too soon. We compare too much. We interrupt compounding not just in our money, but in our life. And in the end, the market always teaches the same lesson. That the ones who wait don't just grow richer, they grow wiser. So when Munger said, the big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting, I think he wasn't warning us about the market. He was warning us about ourselves. Because most of us aren't losing money. We're losing time, pretending we're investing it. Every morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I had to, but because I didn't know how to stop. The habit of working became stronger than the reason I started. I'd walk into the same office I built 30 years ago. Same walls, same coffee mug, same calendar that never seemed to move forward, only sideways. There was a time when I thought that routine meant discipline. Now I know it was just fear of stopping, fear of wasting time, fear of falling behind in a race I no longer believe in. On paper, I had done everything right. My portfolio was balanced, my debt was cleared, my future was secure. But security is a strange thing. It looks solid from a distance, and hollow when you finally stand inside. My wife used to say, you don't even enjoy the things you've worked for. And I laughed it off. Because I thought enjoying life was something you earned after the work was done. But the work never ended, it just evolved. New investments, new strategies, new ways to pretend I was still moving forward. The office had become my world, a museum of my past decisions. Flying certificates, dusty stock reports, and a shelf of books I used to quote more than I read. Ben Graham, Buffett, Munger, they were my companions. Not friends, not mentors, companions. Words on paper that made me feel less alone in the pursuit of rationality. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, staring at a statement showing another quarterly gain. The numbers looked perfect, but I felt nothing. No thrill, no pride, just silence. That's when I realized something unsettling. I was managing my money, but not my life. The older I got, the clearer it became. Wealth isn't measured by what you can buy. It's measured by what you can afford to lose. And somehow, I built a fortune I was too afraid to spend. Because spending meant admitting that time was passing. I used to believe money gave you freedom. But freedom without purpose is just another kind of trap. Quiet, polished, and perfectly designed to look like success. That's the thing no one tells you about wealth. It can become the safest prison you'll ever live in. You don't hear the birds closing, because they sound like applause. The ship didn't come with a crash. It came quietly like a real change buried deep in the fine print of life. I remember the day it happened. I was at a luncheon for retired executives, the kind of event where everyone wears the same navy blazer, the same polite smile, the same subtle panic pretending they're still relevant. The speaker that day was a young financial consultant, barely in his 30s. He spoke with that sharp, caffeinated confidence that only comes from never having lost anything real. The old way of investing is over, he said. The future belongs to those who keep moving, who never sit still. The crowd nodded, hungry for something new to believe in. And for the first time in years, I felt irritated, because I recognized the tone. It was the same voice I used to have, the same arrogant stress as optimism. When the talk ended, he came up to me, probably short gray hair, and thought I was a donor, not a listener. "Sure," he said, "if you're sitting on old money, it's time to make it work harder." I smiled politely, but his words stayed with me. That night, I went home and opened my portfolio again as if it had betrayed me while I wasn't looking. I started moving things around, selling what had sat too long, buying what looked exciting. It felt productive, alive. I told myself I was adapting, staying sharp. But deep down, I was doing exactly what he wanted, interrupting compounding. Charlie Munger used to warn about this activity is the enemy of returns. But I didn't listen. Because movement feels like progress even when it's just panic wearing the shoe. Within months, the rhythm of my life changed. I was checking markets again, watching screens light up at 3 a.m. My calm mornings turned into restless nights all over a few percentage points that didn't even matter. I had broken my own rule, never chase noise. But this wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity, about proving to myself that I still mattered in a world that rewarded the young and punished the patient. The more I traded, the emptier I felt. Because the market wasn't punishing me financially. It was punishing me emotionally for forgetting the very thing that built my wealth in the first place: discipline. That's the strange part about success. The more you have, the easier it becomes to mistake motion for meaning. And before you know it, you've gone from investor to gambler, from student of patience to servant of noise. The ship wasn't a new rule from the market. It was a new rule from within me. A silent permission to trade peace for relevance. For a while, it worked. That's the part people never talk about, the dangerous calm before the fall. The market rewarded my restlessness. Every risky move I made seemed to land perfectly. I told myself I was smarter now, more adaptive, more alive. I started waking up early again, not to enjoy the sunrise, but to watch numbers rise. It felt good, addictive, even. The same way a gambler feels when the first hand wins. I told my friends that I was back in the game. They laughed, said I hadn't aged a day. I took their praise like proof that I'd done the right thing. Every chart, every spike, every green candle felt like applause from the universe. And soon, I started giving it back again to people who had once looked up to me. "You can't sit still anymore," I'd say. "The world moves too fast." I had become that young consultant I once despised. But I didn't see it then. Because when you're winning, even bad philosophy sounds wise. There's a strange thing that happens when luck disguises itself as logic. You start thinking the universe owes you consistency. That your success is proof of correctness. That if you've beaten the odds once, you'll do it again. And so, I began to build a story. A comforting illusion that my new way of investing wasn't gambling, it was evolution. I told myself I'd adapted to the modern world. That patience was outdated. That Charlie Munger's wisdom was from another era, a slower, smaller time. The irony. I even quoted him in my justifications. Invert, always invert, I'd say twisting his words to defend the very behavior he warned against. In my mind, I was being fair to myself, to my age, to my ambition. After all, hadn't I earned the right to take risks? I'd spent decades being cautious, disciplined, restrained. Now that I finally had something to lose, wasn't it fair to test how far I could go? The illusion of fairness is seductive. It tells you that balance is something you can calculate, that risk and reward always shake hands. But they don't. Risk smiles when it wins, and vanishes when it doesn't. Still, the numbers on my screen kept rising. I started spending again subtly at first. A new car. A watch I didn't need. A trip I couldn't enjoy because I was checking stock alerts under the table. My friends noticed. "You are glowing again," one of them said. And I smiled. But deep down, I knew it wasn't glow, it was the burn of chasing relevance. The thing about illusions is that they don't break all at once. They fade like fog leaping slowly, revealing the wreckage underneath. It started with small things, a sudden dip I couldn't explain, a deal that didn't close, a position I held for too long. Nothing dramatic. Just cracks. And in those cracks, I heard echoes of Munger's voice. Calm, detached, as if from another lifetime. The big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting. I used to understand that. Now it sounded foreign, like advice for a man I no longer was. I told myself it was just a phase, that the market would correct, that this was simply the cost of adaptation. But adaptation without principle isn't progress. It's erosion, slow, invisible, terminal. And deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't adapting. I was decaying quietly, confidently, and with spreadsheets to prove it. The first thing to break wasn't the market. It was my rhythm. I stopped sleeping properly. My mornings used to begin with sunlight and coffee. Now they began with notifications. The phone would buzz before dawn, price alert, volume spike, after hours movement. I'd reach way before my glasses. The irony didn't escape me. I'd spent half my life building a portfolio for peace. And somehow, peace was the only thing I no longer owned. I told myself it was temporary, that every great investor has their rough patches. But this wasn't a patch. It was a pattern. My decisions became emotional, subtle, but emotional. A red candle would trigger a sense of personal insult. A market dip felt like betrayal. I began to take things personally, as if the economy itself had a vendetta against my confidence. And the worst part, I still looked successful. To everyone around me, I was the same calm, calculated man they always known. I'd smile at dinners, talk about diversification, joke about market psychology. But inside, I was unraveling in slow motion. The mind has a cruel way of protecting itself. It rationalizes collapse as correction. Every bad trade was a learning moment. Every sleepless night was part of the process. I used Charlie Munger's quotes like painkillers, not for wisdom, but for denial. Invert, always invert. I repeated it like a prayer, trying to make sense of losses that weren't logical anymore. One night, while watching the ticker crawl across the screen, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't investing anymore. I was reacting. Every click was a confession of failure. Every trade was a way to postpone silence. Because silence meant reflection. And reflection meant facing the truth. That somewhere along the way, I had stopped chasing wealth and started chasing motion. My portfolio wasn't a collection of assets. It was a mirror, one that reflected everything I didn't want to see. My fear of aging, my discomfort with stillness, my need to prove that I could still play the same game as the young ones. That's when the cracks turned visible. A deal I was certain about gone overnight. Each trusted friend showed before telling me. The group chats that once buzzed with excitement suddenly silent when I entered. I could feel it, the quiet distancing that happens when luck runs out. No one ever says it, but success has gravity people orbit it. When it fades, they drift away. My calls started going unanswered. My advice stopped being quoted. It's strange how quickly admiration turns to analysis, and analysis turns to absence. One evening, I sat in my office, the same place where I first felt reborn, surrounded by charts, alerts, and the faint hum of the air conditioner. The room was colder now. Or maybe I was. On my desk sat a framed quote, something I printed years ago from one of Munger's interviews. The big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting. I still did it for a long time. Waiting, that was the part I had forgotten. Because waiting requires faith. And faith requires silence. I have replaced both with movement. Constant, endless, meaningless movement. The screen in front of me flickered green, then red, then green again. It looked alive, like a pulse. I realized the market was waiting, and I was holding my breath with it. That's when it hit me. I hadn't built a portfolio. I had built a dependency. I wasn't addicted to profit. I was addicted to uncertainty. I turned off the monitor for the first time in weeks. The silence that filled the room was almost violent. I could hear the ticking of my old wall clock, the one I'd stopped noticing long ago. Time was still moving, even when I wasn't watching. The market taught me a lesson I already knew intellectually and refused to learn emotionally. What I'd been calling bad timing or market volatility was, more honestly, my own mind rearranging itself around fear. Fear is a poor teacher. It dresses itself as prudence and calls its impulses strategy. The moment I started trading not from analysis but from avoidance, I surrendered to an emotional logic I'd always claimed to despise. There are 5 emotions that rule poor decisions late in life: comparison, urgency, vindication, regret, and identity defense. Each is ordinary. Each is tiny. Each compounds into ruin. Comparison is the quietest thief. You'll scroll a little. You'll hear a neighbor boast again. You'll feel a small, corrosive tug as if the universe had conspired to make you look small. The tug becomes a push. You'll bite to catch up. You'll shout to prove you were right. You'll trade your future for someone else's highlight reel. Urgency tastes like action. It promises you control when the truth is you are trying to wrestle uncertainty into shape. We confuse motion with mastery. We think that because we act, we govern outcomes. We don't. We only pollute patience. Vindication is the worst kind of addict's high. We need experts to see us as wise. A profitable trade becomes social ammunition. We trade to be right in public, to silence an inner critic with a bank statement. That statement is temporary. The critic is relentless. Regret is retroactive currency. You replay a missed opportunity until the memory becomes a mandate. Make up for it. The mandate overrides judgment. You double down on impulse because your mind keeps trying to balance a ledger that time has already closed. Identity defense is shallow and stubborn. I feel people aren't just protecting capital. They're protecting a self-image competent, relevant, in control. When that image feels threatened, financial choices become armor. But armor is heavy. It slows you down. It breaks your shoulders. I had all 5. They didn't arrive in a single storm. They arrived as whether persistent, elusive, normal. And because they were normal, I excused them. Normality is the best camouflage for catastrophe. The paradox is clinical. The more experience you have, the better your model should be. But the more invested you are in an identity, the worse your model becomes. Experience hardens into stubbornness. Stubbornness masks itself as conviction. Charlie Munger outlined the mental model's impression: circle of competence, Margin of safety as tools. Tools require discipline. But discipline is brittle when wielded by an ego desperate for verdicts. The models were not enough. I needed temper. Temper is the ability to hold silence when the world yells. The human brain is built to prefer story over statistics. A story of an lucky trade outshines decades of steady compound returns in a single dopamine sweep. Stories are vivid. They are narrated immediate experiences. Numbers are abstract slowness. We are story animals. That's why Manuel's aphorisms were short stories about wish. But aphorisms function only if you allow them to sink. So how does one change course when the machinery inside is set to react? It starts with a single, counterintuitive practice: deliberate ignorance. Not ignorance as negligence, but ignorance as discipline, choosing not to know what will distract you. Limiting the flow of financial gossip. Closing the feed. Upgrading the social theater of trading updates. When you narrow input, you restore the conditions for compounding in your accounts and in your relationships. The next practice is role separation. Separate the identity that works from the identity that invests. The part of you that goes to meetings, that argues, that seeks validation let it rest. The investor self is patient, small-minded about noise, and untempted by applause. Teach yourself to be that person, daily, by small acts of abstaining. Another practice is structural fetching. Make the hard choice the default. Set withdrawals to autopilot. Limit leverage by policy. Put a rule in your account that requires 72 hours before any non-routine trade long enough for emotion to cool. Architecture beats willpower because architecture outlasts smooth. Finally, humility as routine. Say I don't know out loud once a day. Most early mistakes in my life came from pretending to know. Admitting ignorance doesn't make you impudent, it makes you selective. Selection is the essential investment activity at failing. These are not technical hacks. They are temperament shifts. They are slow. They are boring. Which is the point? Boredom is the currency of survival when compounding matters. Psychology explains why I sold early, bought shiny, and traded too quickly. Psychology also explains the remedy. We must become architects of our attention. We must construct lives where patience is possible. This isn't about denial of risk, it's about containment of the short-term mind. In practice, that meant I stopped reading market chatter after 8 p.m. It meant I reinstated old rules I'd broken for the taste of relevance. It meant I treated my portfolio like a garden, planted, watered, and left to grow. Not poked every morning to see if it had felt anything. Every illusion I had about control wasn't born inside me. It was thought-designed, even. The financial world doesn't just sell products. It sells emotion. Every portfolio update, every red or green arrow, every breaking market alert, they all whisper the same command: react. They don't care whether your reaction is joy or fear, only that you move. Because motion creates volume, and volume fades profit. I used to believe investing was a test of intelligence. It isn't. It's a test of restraint. But restraint doesn't generate ad revenue. Somewhere along the way, finance became entertainment. The news ticker replaced the moral compass. You could open a trading app and feel like a general commanding an army, graphs rising, falling, obeying your fingertips. But those little victories came with a hidden tax: attention. Attention, that's the real currency now. The longer they keep your eyes, the more you pay, even if you'll never click buy. And when your sense of wealth becomes tied to screen movement, stillness starts to feel like loss. In Charlie Munger's time, investing was a quiet craft. People read annual reports, not headlines. Patience was a virtue, not a weakness. Today, patience feels obsolete. The culture rewards immediacy, profit screenshots, viral trades, overnight success. We built an ecosystem that praises reaction and punishes reflection. It's no longer about compounding wealth. It's about performing it. The tragedy is subtle. A man can spend 40 years building savings, yet lose his peace to a screen designed to make him doubt. He may be financially independent and emotionally bankrupt. And it's not just the individuals. It's generational. Young investors are being raised in the language of speculation before they've learned the grammar of patience. They don't just want returns. They want recognition. The markets became mirrors for ego. And mirrors, once stared into too long, don't reflect, they absorb. I began noticing how this culture seeps into everything. It wasn't just my portfolio that was volatile, it was my attention span, my relationships, my sense of time. Dinner conversations turned into debates about what's next. The idea of simply holding a stock, a belief, a relationship started to feel naive. I realized we're living in a permanent bull market of anxiety. Charlie once said, the big money is not in the buying or selling, but in the waiting. That word waiting sounds simple. But in this economy, it's radical. Because waiting demands silence. And silence doesn't trend. Entire industries now exist to erode that silence. They sell prediction models, trading signals, motivational sound bites, all to remind you that you could be doing more. The irony is cruel. The people who get rich from the market don't trade all day. They trade rarely, decisively, then let time work. The rest of us mistake the noise for opportunity. We confuse participation with purpose. And so, societies drift toward short-termism. Governments borrow from the future to win the present. Companies optimize for quarterly earnings instead of legacy. Individuals trade ambition for convenience. It's not a financial crisis, it's a psychological one. We're in the mask of progress. The cure, if there is one, won't come from new tools. It will come from cultural amnesia, forgetting the myth that faster is smarter, that more data means more wisdom. Because knowledge isn't what saves you. Temperament does. Munger understood that. He built wealth the way others built character, slowly, deliberately, with moral restraint. He didn't chase. He compounded. Not just his money, but his mind. I sometimes imagine if he were you, watching what the markets have become, the influencers, the algorithms, the dopamine, he wouldn't scold. He'd just smile and say, the world's got noisier. The rules have been changed. Because deep down, he knew, markets don't reward intelligence. They reward endurance. The system didn't corrupt me, it simply magnified what was already there. The greed, the fear, the hunger for control, they weren't born on Wall Street. They were born in me. And that's the part I had to face alone. I always thought I was chasing freedom, the freedom that money promised. I convinced myself that success would bring respect, comfort, maybe even happiness. Every promotion, every deal, every dollar felt like a step closer to a life I deserved. But looking back, I realized I was chasing an illusion, not just of wealth, but of control. The more I climbed, the more I thought I was mastering life, but in truth, life was quietly mastering me. Behind every gain, there was a loss I couldn't see at the time. Friendships quietly fade. Time with family became a ledger of missed moments. The very things I thought I was buying, security, legacy, pride, slipped further away with every choice I made. Money didn't just change my life, it peeled away layers of it, until what was left was just me staring back in the mirror, wondering who I had become. I believed the system rewarded effort and loyalty. But in truth, the system is blind. It doesn't notice what you lose, it only counts what you gain. And in that count, the currency isn't just dollars, it's trust, love, time, and sometimes, your own sense of morality. The people I thought were allies were gone. The ones who mattered most were distant. And the achievements I celebrated, they echoed in empty rooms, their value hollow without anyone to share them with. The truth beneath it all is brutal in its simplicity. Wealth can be measured in numbers, True life is measured in connection, in moments, in the quiet trust of those who care. You can accumulate millions, but if the cost is everything else, what have you really gained? This is a layer no one talks about, no guidebook warns you about. The hidden ledger of life doesn't record money, it records what you sacrifice to earn it. And so, the question I face now is the one I ignored for decades. Was it worth it? Could I have climbed slower, loved more, noticed more? Or was this inevitability the cost of wealth, something every ambitious person eventually pays, whether they see it coming or not? The truth beneath the surface isn't about riches or power. It's about clarity, the realization that life, in all its subtle beauty, is fleeting, and nothing can truly replace it once it's gone. I thought the joy was mine to write up my choices, my ambition, would define the life I live. But the truth, the twist, is that life doesn't follow our plans. It writes its own chapters while we're busy counting numbers, chasing milestones, or chasing respect that others never really gave. The irony is almost cruel. The very wealth I believed would protect me from emptiness became a mirror showing exactly what I lacked. I had power, status, accounts that grew, yet I was profoundly alone. Not because the world turned against me, but because I had turned away from the world. And the cost was the simple, irreplaceable moments that no amount of money can buy. Looking back, I realize now that happiness is not found in accumulation, or in conquest, or even in recognition. It was hidden all along, in quiet mornings with people who care, in laughter that doesn't require an audience, in time that feels endless only because it is shared. And I had spent decades blind to it, believing that wealth was the answer. The twist, then, is this: I earned everything I wanted and lost everything I needed. And yet, even now, there is a lesson that lingers, painful but clear. The measure of a life isn't in the ledger of success, but in the echo of presence, the quiet proof that we were truly here, with someone, for someone, beyond ourselves. And so I am left with the final reflection. Wealth can build walls, it can buy comfort, it can impress the world, but it cannot assure what we neglect. What I thought was the price was actually the warning. And perhaps that is the cruel, beautiful truth. We only recognize what truly mattered when it is almost too late.